Okay, we're going to do the spring hinge and a pull string for the rudder on this RES 2-meter plane. Right now I am cutting and bending the spring. This is 0.6 millimeter piano wire. I've already installed the little sleeves that came with the kit that were supposed to have the push rod running through it. Just little, probably 3/4 inch lengths into the fin and into the rudder. I measured the one and folded it with the plier, and now I am measuring the next one, putting the Sharpie mark right where that hole in the rudder is, where the sleeve is. And then I'm going to bend it. You'll have to stare at this for a while to figure out which way to bend, but basically what we're looking for is so that when it's relaxed, the rudder should be, the spring for the rudder would be 90 degrees away from the control horn, as you can see here. So the spring is relaxed and it's pushing the rudder all the way down that way. That way when the pull string pulls on the horn, it's tension all the way. So I'm going to just make sure it fits really well. It's tricky to get that bend the right length, and if you get it the wrong length, just throw out the wire and do another one. You'll get it in 2 or 3 runs, and practice makes perfect. Now I'm going to do the tricky little tape hinge that keeps the spring from pulling the rudder up alongside the fin because of the string tension. The rudder has been beveled 45 degrees, so one side is flush with the fin and the other side is beveled 45 degrees. And what I'm making here is, out of Kapton tape, a basically almost piece of double-sided tape. You can see it's overlapped by 3/16 of an inch, about that, with one side sticky facing one way, one side sticky facing the other, and then the tape glued to itself. And what I'm going to do, very awkwardly here, is put it so that the one sticky side on the rudder is on the top as we're looking at it, and the bevel is on the bottom as we're looking at it. So the idea here is to put this in a position of tension, or so that if the rudder tries to move towards us, which it will do as the string pulls on it and the thing's flexing and it's pulling it forward, it'll try to slide up towards us because of the 45-degree bevel. So what this does, if you can get the tape position just right, is keeps that from happening. And this is durable. I've never had to change one of these once I've done it. It's just very fussy to get it in place. And everything about this whole video is going to be awkward. And I'll tell you that you're looking at 12 minutes out of 2 hours of work. It's awkward. I had to redo parts. That's just the way it is. It's okay. It's worth it in the end. This works really well. It's nice and light. So anyway, the trick is here to bring these together so that they're really touching at the hinge point, and then get your finger under there and stick the tape to the vertical fin. So I've got it in the position I want, and go. Now maybe you notice that there's masking tape as a temporary hinge up at the top, and that I have masking tape at the bottom as a temporary hinge. Now I'm going to just put a drop of very thin CA at each point where the wire goes into the stab, making sure that it's flush and at the rudder. Because of that tube, it'll wick right down in there. Most of my airplanes don't have a plastic sleeve. It's just straight into the balsa. But you really need to get glue more along the length of the wire, which is tricky. So I just decided to go with sleeves for this. Also, the horizontal stab, which I'm not showing here, has a very delicate internal structure. All right, now what I'm going to do is move that top temporary masking tape hinge down to the middle, because I'm going to put the permanent hinge on, and the permanent hinge is going to be more Kapton. Kapton isn't very pretty, along with my beautiful blue and white airplane, but it absolutely works the best of anything I've tried. And I've got some really nice high-end clear tape that works everywhere except Phoenix at 110 degrees, at which point it shrinks up and twists your control surface out of shape, especially spoilers. So this is a competition plane. For me, no compromises, so Kapton it is. So what I'm doing is pulling it straight, getting it touched down, and now I've got a hinge along the top half, and I can pull the temporary stuff off. Of course, I've got a hinge on the bottom, although it's a funny hinge. The thing is only hinged kind of on one side, but as soon as I get the tape down here, everything will be fine. You're going to see that I accept a little bit of a wrinkle here. For me, that's not a problem. Obviously, I could peel it up and do it again if I cared, but a tiny little wrinkle here isn't going to matter. What matters is that the rudder's in the right position and hinges freely. That's everything here. And you'll notice that I put the hinge on with the rudder bent, not bent, but moved to the far extreme right-hand position. So I want the top of the bevel touching the vertical stab, but I'm doing it with it bent down here so that it's got clear action. So that's it. That's the spring and the hinge. Onto the pull string. I'm just taking a quick look at how long this horn is. I see I've got to cut the last hole off of it. In terms of setting this horn length for a rudder, I want it to be about the same length as the control horn on the rudder, because I want about 45 degrees of travel on the rudder, just less, and servos happily move about 45 degrees. I'm not too fussy about this, but the hole that's roughly the length of the control horn is what I want. I'm going to bring in the transmitter now. I'm going to check the direction, get the direction of travel correct, and then set the center, because at least on this radio, if you when you change the direction, the center moves. All I'm doing is visually lining that control horn up perpendicular to the servo. For rudders and elevators, I want equal travel, especially on the rudder. It's really important to get this right. And I'm going to leave this powered up and transmitter on and everything for the whole rest of this operation, because we're going to set the length with it centered. So here's my pull string, which is beading cable. I'm going to leave probably a foot extra. Stuff's cheap. Don't make yourself crazy with too short things. I go ahead and tape this down before I cut it, otherwise it unwinds itself all over the shop, and this is an awkward enough process without that. Okay, before I feed the cable in, I'm going to make this little clamp arrangement to hold the rudder straight. With a built-up rudder like this, it holds it perfectly straight, which is exactly what you want. If you're doing this on a hand launch with a molded rudder and stab, it's curved the whole way, and this doesn't quite work as well, but you can put little shims in and stuff. But the same idea, you just want to hold this straight for the whole rest of this operation, and straight is really important, because if you've got that servo at perpendicular where you want it, but then the rudder comes out not perpendicular at center, the only way to fix it is to move the servo off center, and then you'll have differential travel, which is not ideal. So I'm feeding the pull string through. This airplane has a tiny little notch in that former that I put in while I was building the plane. And now, since I've got an extra foot or more, I can just pull this out. What I'm doing there is putting tension on the back of the pull string and on the front, and sliding it back and forth and making sure it's smooth. It's pretty easy to get that, bound up around like a post that holds the horizontal stab or something. So sort of my last chance to make sure it feels smooth. Now I'm putting the crimps on. I use 2 crimps just for redundancy. I've never had one break, but I've certainly had them slide. So anyway, 2 crimps for me, and I'm just going to put them on there, get them crimped, and then I'm not going to show it in the video. I think I did it off frame or something, but it's important to pull that tight on the servo arm and actually kind of squeeze it down around the servo arm and kink it so that there's no springiness. If you imagine the cable, and you're going to see this on the rudder, I'll do it again. If it loops through with any springiness, then you're not going to get a good center. So once this is crimped, and that's a little more fussy work. Once this is crimped, I'm going to actually squeeze the pull string, which is really steel cable. I'm going to actually squeeze it with pliers down on that horn to make sure it's really flat and not kind of springy or sloppy. So sorry I didn't show that, but that's the missing step there. And then I just make sure it's all straight in here and not kind of in sideways, and now with my right hand I pulled on it while I moved the transmitter control just to make sure, again, everything's smooth, everything's the way I want it. Let's see, what I didn't show on video is me knocking that tube over and having to pick up things like 3 times. Like I said, this is, for me, it doesn't matter how many times I do it, it's awkward. Oh well. So I'm going to put 2 of these on, feed it through the horn, and I put it on the horn hole closest to the hinge, although this horn is doesn't have many options. It doesn't matter, like I said, I set the servo horn about the same length. So there it's feeding through. I'm going to double check that my rudder is still straight, because once this is crimped, if it's wrong, you just got to start over on the string, which is no big deal. These materials aren't expensive, and it doesn't actually take that long to do it. I've spent hours trying to figure out how to fix one that was wrong, and get out your cutters and do it. Speaking of cutters, those blue-handled Giron cutters that I snipped the piano wire spring with, those are kind of indispensable. I don't know anything else that will cut piano wire besides a Dremel abrasive wheel without ruining the cutters. Now here's a good place. Don't get the crimps down inside the tail boom, or you're starting over. Okay, so you can see I'm going to really fuss with this. I'm really going to get it tight, and I'm going to pull it through to the one side, kink the side closest to us with my fingernail, pull on it again, kink the whole thing. And this is the same operation I did on that horn that I didn't show, is that little squeeze. That was critical. Now these crimpers are electronics crimpers. They're strippers with little crimpers at the end. I find they work really well. I've bought a pair of beading crimpers. I don't really like the way they work as well. This has more of almost a serration to it. Honestly, most airplanes I've ever built I've done just with that yellow-handled pair of pliers down there you haven't seen me pick up, which is just a pair of needle nose, so this is not that critical. I always do try to give them a tug with my fingers and make sure they're really not sliding. And now the moment of truth. When I unclamp that, if the rudder springs to one side, I failed and I got to start over. But you can see this is pretty straight. That's straight enough. Much worse than that, I'd remake the string. Now I'm checking for freedom of motion. Chasing crimps, cutting off the excess string, and voila, I'm done. Just have to do the elevator.